The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. With the mayoral primary behind us, we turn this morning to the Cincinnati City Council race. Of the 9 seats on council, only the one vacated by Roxanne Qualls to run for mayor is technically open. The seat that is filled by Pam Thomas should be considered in play since she was appointed in April to fill the seat of her husband Cecil Thomas, who resigned. She has never won the race outright. 3 members of council, Seelbach, Simpson, Sittenfeld, are in their first terms and could be considered vulnerable. 22 people, 8 women, 14 men, 3 former council members, Amy Murray, Sam Malone, and David Mann, those 3 want to return. The other ones all want to be on council. 4 endorsed Republicans, 4 endorsed charter rights. Some of those are cross-endorsed. And in one of the strangest moves in party history, 10 endorsed Democrats for 9 seats, meaning that if a voter casts votes for all 10, their ballot will be disqualified. Tim Burke explained that. 5 candidates are not endorsed by any party. I am in a crowded field races like this. I cannot interview everyone. My approach is not to interview incumbents. They already have the advantage and a lot of publicity, especially with the hotly contested mayor's race, sucking all the money and attention from council. Non-incumbents have a very difficult problem. Over the next 8 weeks, I will be interviewing non-incumbent members, candidates for city council who I think have some chance this year or who are interesting and may be effective candidates in the future. We begin with the first 2 first-time candidates. Michelle Dillingham is an endorsed Democrat. By training, she is a social worker and serves as president of the Kennedy Heights Community Council. She was an aide to the late David Crowley, giving her experience inside City Hall. Mike Morosky has no party endorsement. He lives downtown and is director of the Permagnic Eco Garden in Over the Rhine. You may remember him from a flurry of news stories last February when he was fired by the Archdiocese of Cincinnati when he was at Purcell Marian High School because he supported gay marriage on his personal blog site. Many students and parents rallied to his side. Michelle, Mike, welcome to Newsmakers. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
I'm going to ask the simple question, because most people out there don't know either one of you. They know you maybe through headlines and a little bit. They know you through some headlines, which we'll talk about later on here. But most people really don't know you. Why are you running?
I am running for Cincinnati City Council because I have a lifetime of advocacy behind me. I like to say that I learned community building from the best. I worked for former Vice Mayor David Crowley, as you know, and it was an incredible experience at working on policy that has a real and lasting impact on the lives of families in Cincinnati. So I want to bring my unique personal and policy experience to City Hall.
You know, and I think on your website,
yes,
you talk, I presume you wrote your own background material.
Yes.
You talk about this fascination with policy.
Yes.
Not all elected officials, not all council people are really into policy.
Yes.
And what is it, when you say that, what do you mean and why do you think that's important?
Well, policy is really the rules by which everything happens, you know. From how much funding the Free Store Food Bank gets to how many potholes we fill to every issue you can think of is really driven by the policy. And the 9 members of council are charged with setting the policy for the city. And so throughout my life, I learned as an administrative social work student that that was really the best way to make the most impact, is to really affect policy at the macro level.
Mike, how about you? Why are you running?
Well, I'm running, you know, after a life in education and community organizing, primarily working over issues regarding affordable housing, homelessness, and returning citizens, I have come, while I've always been interested in politics, I have come to see an elected position as being the ultimate community organizing role. I've come about in that angle. You know, to Michelle's point, having the ability to affect policy, affect the way decisions are made that can benefit potentially hundreds of thousands of people with a single decision. And there's something challenging about that I enjoy, and there's also something rewarding about that, the ability to make decisions that benefit people and make their lives better. And so that's why I'm running.
As a teacher, you know, we could say you were at Purcell Marion. Before that, you were at Muller. You weren't just a classroom teacher. From very early on, you were involved in issues with the poor. You were involved in Over the Rhine. Sort of give people a sense of what, you know, what the breadth, and you say you want to speak for people. Who are you really talking about?
Well, you know what you're referring to, of course, when I was at Muller, my first year I started taking students down to rehab buildings for affordable housing with Restock, which led me to a board position on the drop-in center, which led me to open a not-for-profit cafe, Choices Cafe. When I talk about making decisions for people, you know, what I've seen in my life on the ground, I've seen a lot of folks who have been left behind and whose voices just simply aren't heard. And I think it's time that they have somebody or some people on council that can speak on their behalf.
Dave Crowley was one of those.
Yes.
Yes, he really had a tradition, and losing him was a big loss. Michelle, one of the things that you speak about, and I want to keep referring this, people can find out a lot more about you on the web, on your websites. You talk about the need for a balanced budget. How do you think the city should approach this? Because the city for a decade now has not had a balanced budget. How do we need to move forward so that we can do the things that you want to do?
Right. Well, you know, there are some real solutions out there. I have enumerated a number of them on my website in my seat at the table. It's an economic inclusion plan. But you know, from my perspective, we don't need to continue to cut. You know, what members of council, the administration need to do is really look to grow, because we all deserve and we pay for core services such as police, fire, safety, recreation, food inspectors, healthcare inspectors. So the question is, instead of looking to what we can downsize and cut, what can we do to grow revenues?
And what do you think we can do to grow revenues?
I think the best way to grow revenue is to actually address the issue that 1 in 2 children live below the federal poverty line, and to look at real solutions to bringing manufacturing jobs a high percentage of folks in our community can partake in. And currently, there's not a lot of those jobs available. We have a high recidivism rate down at the jail. When people get out, if it's not for a social service, they have a very difficult time finding something I know I take for granted, something like finding their birth certificate so that they can get a license so they can apply for a job. We have a number of folks in our city now that can't participate in the economy, and so I think through smart legislation we can open up more avenues to success. And when we do that, we grow our tax base, and City Hall right now is relying on 70% income tax, whereas...
Yeah, and you say that we need to rely more on property taxes.
Correct.
Which I found an interesting line in your plans.
Correct.
Why?
Well, and
there's a lot of people who would say the small house owner already pays too many property taxes.
Correct. And part of that is because there's an imbalance in who's paying property tax and where. I mean, the property tax rollback was good, I think, about a decade ago to get folks downtown. And I'm not talking about repealing it entirely in one fell swoop, but revisiting how the property taxes are utilized, because at the end of the day, property tax is something you can count on. Income tax, relying on 70% of your revenue from income tax, when that can vanish like this, as evidenced by Chiquita, you know, I just think we need to be smarter about it, because raising the income tax, I think a lot of people take for granted Procter & Gamble is here, and they're moving jobs overseas, and, you know, I'm not a Chicken Little saying they're going to leave, but we need to make sure we keep those companies.
Well, the reality is, in this economy, is that new jobs don't come from the big corporations. They find profits by economizing and cutting. New jobs come from entrepreneurial new companies.
Correct.
You know, and what can the city do to attract more of that?
You know, I like to talk about the story of the Nehemiah Manufacturing Company, where we had 2 local executives kind of work with P&G and create an opportunity for people to work locally here on a brand, on a product, and partnering with the city. And that's a prime example of why we don't want to reduce our capacity of our city administration. We want a good, strong, thriving economic development department at the city, so those deals and those agreements with our business community can happen.
What do you think of the proposal right now, this sort of argument that's going on about the relocation from Loveland to downtown Cincinnati or to Covington of the Pure Romance Company, which the state seems to have backed off on? The city council this week passed legislation urging the state to reconsider. How do you feel about something like that?
If I was on city council currently, I would vote to support Pure Romance moving downtown, and we're talking 120 plus jobs and millions of dollars of revenue.
I agree, yes.
Okay, same thing. So you're not willing, you're not against giving tax breaks to companies to get them here or get them in a particular place? Well,
you know, that's a big tool in our economic development toolbox. The question is, you know, let's make sure that we're getting a good return on our investment when we give those away. One
of the big areas of constant tension on the budget is on safety services, particularly police and, well, police and fire, but especially the police force. You are the president of the Kennedy Heights Community Council. Kennedy Heights earlier this summer had 2 murders, and we had a response, and we have a little video from the response, the vigil that was held by the citizens of what should be the role of the police. Where do you see funding for police force? How big? Should we be cutting back? Should we be increasing? Where should we be with the police force?
Well, I feel that we need a full complement of police officers to right size with our city. And I would rely on the men and women of the police department who are out on the ground every day and their supervisors to weigh in on that. Those are the people that are doing the work. They're on the ground seeing what's going on, and we need to trust what they're saying. We also want to look to our community leaders and our faith leaders and our communities and say, what do you see? I know that I'm hearing when people call 911, they're waiting 20 and 30 minutes for a response. So my position is that we need enough police.
Are they waiting 20 and 30 minutes? I mean, this gets at the same thing that we're hearing about Detroit, where the response time was up to almost an hour, 50-something minutes. Is it they're waiting 20 and 30 minutes for all responses, or if there's a certain type of thing coming on, the police are there quickly? Or is it the police are prioritizing and saying, we don't have to be there in 4 minutes, we can be there in 20 minutes, because it's already happened?
Right. Well, I know if it's an emergency, and I feel it's an emergency, I would hope that it would be responded to. But to speak to your point, I know the police department has just made a decision to kind of change the way in which they respond to fender benders. And so that's a way to sort of get creative of how can we really shore up our response to true emergencies, and maybe the fender bender can wait. So
what about the police department? How do you feel?
I feel, you know, I've done a couple ride-alongs and consulted with a number of folks in the force, and from my perspective, after collecting all this data and working in the community organizing world, that the police need a lot of help on the front end. I don't think we can cut the budget. I mean, people say, well, we have 197,000 people in the city, but we have a daytime population of 500,000. We can't cut the police department. We shouldn't be cutting the fire department either, with four men and women to a house, 5 rather. I think they need some help on the front end. Our reactive services are important, but again, those proactive human services are extremely important too. And not to beat a dead horse, but that 50% of our children living in poverty, that's an at-risk population that oftentimes, not always, will end up at the police later in life. So I think they need help on that front end.
Mike, one of your proposals is about, and I forget exactly how it's phrased, about calling for more funding for the school system. Was that you or was that Michelle?
Well, I've put on the website that as an elected official, I would demand more from Columbus. I mean, as a city council member.
Okay. I thought it was you. All right.
Right.
The thing is, you're running for city council, you're not running for school board.
Right.
Why go that direction?
Well, education is such a huge part of my life, obviously, and being an elected official in a municipality, I feel that you have a voice that's louder and can be used to advocate on behalf of the Cincinnati Public Schools, which is why I referenced that.
We really have time only for one more area, and that is this nagging problem of the pension system, and it's being so badly underfunded. What are we going to do with that? If you're on council, what are you open to in terms of doing something about that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'll say is we need to be very careful about outside groups and interests coming in and proposing what they call solutions that we know really
Are you talking about the proposal that's on the ballot?
Yes, I am talking about that. And so I know that there has been work done at the city level in terms of a working group to come together to make some changes. In fact, a couple years ago, some concessions were made. That's not to say that that's going to solve the whole problem. And again, going back to looking at revenue generation, you know, we need to support the pension system at the right level. And to do that, we need resources.
Very quickly and succinctly, what about using a significant portion of the money coming off the parking fees to fund some of this hole? And secondly, just to be clear, you're against the proposal that's going to be on the ballot on the pension question. Is that correct?
Certainly, definitely, yes.
And
it's
how
very
about
bad.
Using money from the parking fee, the parking deal?
Well, that's, I guess, one of the advantages of shifting it into a more private partner is that you can have more flexibility on how you use those dollars, and so the pension would certainly be an option.
Less than 30 seconds, Mike.
Less than 30 seconds. I'm against the proposal that's going to be on the ballot. I'm for keeping a defined benefit plan, and with the downgrading of the bonds, I think we need to be real careful about how we utilize bonds, but we do have massive assets in the railroad, and I've never been able to find where that money goes, so using that to leverage more bonds perhaps, and using the parking money.
You mean the Cincinnati Southern Railroad?
Cincinnati Southern Railroad, and I have all the documents. I've read through them. I cannot find where the revenue goes, and that's another asset we've leased for a long, long time, which is another show.
Okay, stay tuned after the break, and upcoming conference on business technology. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dan, for having us.
Dan.
Big corporations grab most of the attention in business news, but more than half of the net private sector job growth comes from small businesses. Especially important are the new efforts under 5 years old. Many of those entrepreneurial efforts are in the technology space, but no matter what their focus, every company today is dependent on technology. That's why a regional effort has been organized called the Business Technology Summit for October the 29th. Which will be held in the Holiday Inn in Eastgate. To discuss the upcoming summit, I am joined by Michelle Beckham-Corbin, the President and Chief Digital Marketing Strategist of Creating Connections Consulting. She has worked for Procter & Gamble and now focuses on social media marketing, strategy, and brand development. And I think, based on our conversation, I need to say a graduate of Xavier University.
That's right.
There we go.
That's right.
I don't
Good muskies.
I don't mind publishing that. So anyway, this summit, who's this for?
The summit is a regional summit, as you mentioned, and it is primarily focused for managers and C-level folks for small to mid-sized businesses. So typically businesses that employ between 10 and 250 employees.
Okay. And that's a lot of companies in our area. There's just, you know, and the focus is on how those companies can better use technology. Is that the substantive focus?
Actually, kind of three prongs. Number one, strategic planning, but along with that strategic planning, how these companies can harness the latest in technology to create change. Because we really feel in this area that if we can give that extra bit of education to our companies, that will allow them to be able to be better than their competitors and to grow and to build business in our area.
Now, there's some major speakers, and I noticed Stuart Aitken from Dunnhumby is one of the sort of premier speakers. Right. And people who don't know Dunnhumby really need to know Dunnhumby. Is one of these really creative businesses now in the American headquarters here in Cincinnati, building the brand new building right downtown. creative marketing company, really fascinating, their relationship with Kroger's and Macy's.
Absolutely, absolutely. They're all about loyalty and the types of information that companies can kind of distill from their consumers, and then taking that information and then help to create you know, more opportunities with products to grow their businesses.
So really, when you say, and because that's the title of his talk too, when you say loyalty, you're talking about the loyalty between a company and its clients or its consumers or whatever. It's that loyalty that you're talking about, not the loyalty between dunnhumby and Kroger's, although there's loyalty there too.
Absolutely. You know, it's kind of, it's the loyalty between, let's say, we as consumers and the brands, you know.
I had my own business for 20 years. I was a public historian, and you know, certainly used email, but I moved out of doing that at the time that a lot of the social networking was coming on board. So I didn't fully exploit that in my role as a business person. I use all those things now, but how important is that? And I think that's what your business does, right? Helping people better use those sorts of tools?
Absolutely, and you know, what a great question. Businesses today really need to be very strategic. There are so many social and digital tools out there, and we could spend, you know, just days and days trying to figure out where we, you know, examining all of them. And so companies, especially small businesses that may not have the resources of, you know, corporate Fortune 500 company, really need to have that education, which is why the summit is so wonderful, to be able to set strategic plans. A company needs to know not only who is their target market, but where does that target market reside online? Where do they need to build that digital presence online to reach that customer, to build that relationship, which gets to the loyalty and which gets to really building kind of brand ambassadors. If I have a relationship with a brand and I love it, what am I going to do? I'm going to tell my friends about it, right? And so today, 97% of consumers trust peer recommendations. And so that is the art of building engagement and digital communities. And that's a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in my session.
I was noticing that you maintain a blog, and you know, is blogging still an effective tool? Can it be an effective tool?
Absolutely, for a number of reasons. First, you can always put fresh content. With websites, you should try to put fresh content if you can, right? But a lot of times, a majority of the information pretty much is static. The About section on a website's not really going to change a whole bunch, etc. So when you're adding fresh content to something like a blog, you are creating more places for those web crawlers, those spiders, to grab that information about you. And when it's getting fresh information, it's able to churn out search results, helping you to kind of rise higher in search.
I was noticing too that in terms of the people that this summit is trying to attract, it's not just for-profits, it's also not-for-profits, you know, and because not-for-profits need to be thinking in a business-like way as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you've had some background with not-for-profits.
Yes. Yes.
Working same tools, same strategy?
Absolutely, because in the end, what we're trying to do is to create that brand online and making sure that it's consistent from whatever we're doing in the print world, making sure that, you know, the messaging, the image, etc. is consistent, and then reaching folks where they reside online. And the bottom line is, it's all about the call to action. Whether we're trying to push cases of Crest, whether we're trying to encourage as many people to run the local 5K race, whatever it is, we've got to be reaching those folks, engaging them, and getting them to whatever our call to action is.
Final question, because we're just about out of time. You're doing the breakout session around some of the things we've just been talking about, but you just were telling me you're doing a second breakout session that's aimed at younger people?
Absolutely, and actually it's titled Social Media Survival Skills, How Not to Sabotage Your Future. And it's yeah, it's all about teaching teens and young adults how to take care of their personal brand online, how to develop reputation management tools so that they can kind of be aware of what's being said about them. We, whether adults or teens, can be very good about the content that we share, but we have no control over what people may be saying about us or tagging us, etc. And so teens and young adults need to know that, because because colleges are looking, employers are looking, and things have happened when some unsavory information has been discovered.
Well, very good. So there's a pretty wide group of people who might be interested in the summit. I want to make sure people know where to find out information about this, but thank you. The Business Technology Summit will be held Tuesday, October the 29th at the Holiday Inn Eastgate. To get more information and to sign up, go to the website at ohiobiztechsummit.com or call the Claremont Chamber, which is helping to coordinate a lot of this, at 513-576-5000. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning, and join us again next week to meet the men and the women working to shape our community for the future. Have a good week.